Okay, for this second painting exercise, I'm going to be using 3 colors, and I'll be using red, yellow, and blue, which are the primary colors. So I already have some blue on my palette, and I'm just going to put red and yellow down here. So I'm using cadmium red, medium hue. That's kind of a lot of red because red takes over, so you don't need a ton, and I'm putting yellow, and I'm doing cadmium yellow medium hue. And then I'm gonna add a little more blue. Okay. So I have clean water, clean brushes, and the first thing I'm going to show you is a gradient wash. So you may, if you've done watercolor, you may have tried doing washes before, and it's a watery technique. So you make the paper or the canvas very wet, and I'm just putting clean water on my brush and putting it onto the canvas. And the canvas has a lot of texture in it, or if you have watercolor paper, it might have a lot of texture. So I'm kind of trying to fill in those textury divots and stuff going on in there, the tooth that's in there. So I'm getting my brush wet and kind of using different directions of the brush stroke to make sure I'm filling in this entire area with water and getting into all that texture of the canvas. So you start with a very wet canvas, and then you're gonna make watery paint. So we're gonna do this is gonna be another sort of abstract-y landscape where it'll be like a sunset. So I'm gonna have the yellow fading into the red to create orange. So I'm gonna first start with mixing right here on the canvas. And this is a wet into wet technique. So I'm also using wet paint. So I'm picking up some yellow, and I have water on my brush. And so the canvas is wet, and when I put wet paint into there, I'm just getting more water on my brush. You can see I'm kind of dropping in, adding even more water. I'm dropping in, and it's creating these really interesting effects. I'm going to take the red, using a lot of water. Some people even mix their wash colors in like a yogurt container or something else. I maybe am too lazy for that. And you can see this cool stuff starts to happen. Where, you know, it starts to look like ink or watercolor when you're mixing these wet colors together. So this is another reason acrylic is so great. You can get a lot of interesting techniques, see that sort of bloom that's happening there, and experiment with different levels of dryness and wetness in your paint. You know, because if you use a drier paint, it's going to give you a different look than a paint that has a lot of water mixed in. This is also just fun to do. You can also experiment with tilting your canvas and moving that stuff around. Another fun thing to do. This wet on wet and, you know, gradient, you know, this wash technique is not good to do on a easel. You want to be on a flat surface like a desk or something. Because on the easel, it'll all just drip down, which might be what you want. You know, if you want it to drip, you can let it drip. Let it drip a little bit. And so experiment with different amounts of water on your canvas, on your paintbrush, and just see what everything does. And you can see it's starting to pick up in some areas. You know, at a certain point, you do have to let it dry if you don't want that to happen. But I'm gonna let it blend in a little more. Kind of like, think about like dropping the paint in. Okay, now I'm gonna clean my brush, and I'm gonna do the bottom. A little blue and yellow in there. So I'm gonna take a yellow, I mean blue. Do that here. Things that are far away in the distance sometimes look blue. Look bluer and bluer as they get further away. That's a vibrant blue, so that's not exactly what it looks like in the distance, but that's okay. And then we're gonna mix a green, sort of get a green going here the way we got orange on the top. So this is a great way to just get some light color down on your canvas and start to get colors in the general place you want them to be without going too dark. So this is another great way to start. You might love this technique and want to leave some of your painting showing these different watery textures that can happen. This is one of my favorite colors, the blue green kind of teal. Okay, so you can keep experimenting with, moving your canvas around and adding different drynesses of paint in here. I'm gonna add a little, see that really saturated, that blue then blooms when it was a really dry blue. So you can learn how to get that technique with the different dryness and wetnesses of your paint. Try that again. So the canvas is wet, but my paintbrush is pretty wet. And then I'm just dabbing a bit into the dry paint and letting it go. And with this kind of stuff, you really have to do like letting go of the outcome and like letting it be what it is, which is true for watercolor. Sometimes with watercolor, you lose a little control here, but that's kind of the beauty of it, right? Okay, so you can keep experimenting with this. I'm gonna let this dry so then you can see what we can add over it. You can see, I'll do a little bit of glazing so you can see what that looks like. So go grab a snack, let your painting dry, and we'll come back to it. Usually it takes like half an hour, maybe longer. It depends on the humidity where you're painting. Okay, so I waited till this dried about half an hour or so, and you can put your finger on it, and if it's like cool to the touch, it's probably still a little bit wet. So wait until it dries, and we are going to mix the secondary colors from the 3 primary colors for this 3-color study right here. So we have red, yellow, and blue as the primary colors, and I'm using my palette knife, but you can always use your brush to do this. And so I'm gonna mix yellow and red to make orange, and just like the white paint, the yellow paint can get sort of like eaten up by darker colors like red. Red can be really overpowering. So I'm taking more yellow paint, and then I'm just gonna pull out a little bit of this red and mix it in with my palette knife, and you can see how much that red is. And there are people who measure stuff and do it exactly. You can do it however you want to. On the color wheel, it would be right in between, or on the, if you look at a rainbow, it would be right in between, but then there's like more red orange, more yellow orange. So you can have all the mixtures in between too. You can always bring a little more yellow in. And sometimes if it's too dark, I'll just have a little bit of the orange mixture on my palette knife, and I'll pull up some of the fresh yellow, the yellow from the tube, and just mix it in there to get a lighter orange value. So you can make all the steps in between the primary colors and the secondary colors too to get exactly what you want. And you can mix on the palette, you can mix on your canvas. Just gonna clean this off with a paper towel. Okay, so then yellow and blue will make green. So I'm gonna take some clean yellow here and a little bit of blue. Again, the blue takes over. I took a little bit of too much blue. But you can see how it starts turning green. I'm actually gonna clean off my brush and get some more of the yellow and mix it in over here so we have a lighter green to work with too. And we're not using any black and white in this study just because it's an exercise, but of course, you know, you can add white to this and then it's gonna change into more of that pastel look. Red and blue are both pretty strong colors, so you could do kind of an even mixture depending on this purple that you want to get. So the secondary color from red and blue, in between red and blue on the color wheel, is purple. Okay, so now I have all the colors mixed on my palette, the secondary colors mixed on my palette, and I still have globs of the primary colors too if we want to mix in. And with this wash, you might want to leave places of it showing through, or you could just use it as like a sort of sketch underpainting, totally up to you. My brush is still a little damp, so I'm gonna wipe it off even a little more to dry it a little more. And I want you to experiment now. You used really watery paint into a wet canvas. Now that the canvas is dry, I want you to experiment with this more bold paint with just a damp brush and see what those kind of brush strokes are gonna look like. And you can sort of feather it out into a lighter tone. So I'm just wiping the paint off and sort of feathering it out so we can see some of the stuff underneath it, but we still have paint on. So I want you to try going from like a really thick application of the paint here where you're really seeing what that color looks like when it's opaque, and then wiping paint off and kind of fading that out to see how you can sort of blend it out, let the colors below show through. Now this is kind of a way of, it's not technically glazing, but it is like a, scumbling is a technique we'll talk about more when we do texture, but it's like this dry brush, you know, there's just a little bit of paint on the brush, and that almost creates a glaze with like a layering effect because you can see through what's underneath, which is kind of cool. You can also make your brush wet and blend it out that way. So experiment with these different kind of blending techniques, or just with just having like a big bold brush in there. I'm gonna do some lighter orange so we can have some of the different tones. I think for these studies and these experiments, since you're using them as a reference, you want to see all the different things that the paint mixtures can do. So sometimes I'll just put like a big blob so that when it dries, I know exactly what color that's going to look like. And I want to get back to my yellow from the tube because I don't have that anywhere on the canvas yet. So I'm going to clean my paintbrush, dry it off here, my little towel thing. And then sometimes I just check it on a piece of paper towel to make sure that the brush is clean, that there's not any color coming off. And I'm gonna dip into the yellow out of the tube and just do a little bit up here. And then fade it out into this red wash here just to can see how that's turning orange just from the thinness of the paint, the blending of the paint into the red that's underneath there. It almost turns orange, which is really cool. I'm gonna do another layer of this just so I have some really thick of that yellow, pure yellow out of the tube up here. So I remember what it looks like when I'm painting. So I can get the effects that I want. I'm gonna clean this up and do the same with my red. And dry off my brush, wipe it down, get some of this red up here. Brush is still a little too wet, so I'm just wiping off some of the moisture and picking up some more paint on my brush. I'm just gonna kind of glob it on here so I can have an idea of what that looks like right out of the tube. And then I'm gonna wipe some more paint off my brush and kind of blend it out a little bit. So we can see the difference when the yellow's blended into that, you know, gradient, into this wash here. It looks a lot different than when the red is. It just makes it even more vibrant red instead of blending to make the new color. All right, I want to do the same thing while my other brush is clean with the blue. So I'm just going to grab some of the blue, even though we have it up on this one, just for each. Oops, that was very wet. I'm going to pick that up a little bit. Dry off my brush. Get some more blue on here. And layer that on so we have the blue. And then I might do some different techniques of like dabbing. You know, this is one way to blend, and I'm gonna start getting this green in here. This is a little Bob Ross moment, if you know who Bob Ross is. If you don't, you should for sure look him up. But he did a lot of these dabby techniques with different colors on his brush and let them mix sort of on the canvas. So we want to get this green on here. And we're just making sure we get a sense of what all the colors in this study would do. And you can see when I'm dabbing, sometimes I'm pulling it up because of the dampness of my brush. My brush is starting to get dry, which might be an effect that you want. So it's good to do these kind of experiments. And then I'm gonna dab, now that my brush is getting dry, we can dab up into here to see what it looks like on different backgrounds. All right, what color do we need on here? We need some purple. So I think of like, if this is like some kind of weird, you know, sunset landscape, the purple could be for the purple mountains, right? So I might do some suggestion of mountains or hills here to get this purple tone in and let it fade out and mix into the other colors on the canvas so we can see how everything is interacting. And then maybe add a little more red into the purple on this side. And then I'm gonna wipe that off and add a little more blue into the purple on this side so we have the bluer purple over here. So you can see all the different ways that these, you know, these colors mixed together, these three primary colors can really give you so much. And I've been doing a lot of dabbing, so I'm gonna do kind of a smooth stroke here. And I wanna make sure to leave some of these washes showing through, so it's okay if they get lost though. I'm gonna do a lighter green with maybe a little more yellow to get kind of a brighter green. Since we have a lot of different purples and oranges, I kind of want to get more greens on here. So when I use this as a reference, I can see all the different kind of greens I can make. Okay, so I'm taking some more yellow into it. This is getting a little muddy here, and I think because my brush wasn't exactly clean. So if that happens, you might change your water or go to the sink and actually clean your brush off. But let me see what I can do here. Little red might have gotten into it on my palette too. Sometimes not the best results when painting and talking, trying to explain it all. I'm just wiping this off because it's getting like a little bubbly. There's too much water. I'm gonna get a real blue with just a little bit of yellow to add some more of that there so we can see with the yellow and blue mixture when it's more yellow, and then over here, when the yellow and blue mixture when it's more blue, and then over here getting into the more yellow side of it. So I'm just gonna keep adding. So you're trying different brush strokes, trying different blending techniques. It's okay if it doesn't look anything like you want it to or what you thought it would. That's good. I'm gonna take a little purple and just make a more even tone here on the bottom just to get like a nice crisp line. So you can see we can do like, if you get a lot of paint on here, you can get a smooth line if that's what you're looking for. Okay, so you can keep going with this, but I am going to show you how to do a little bit of glazing. So we talked about the underpainting here and what you would do over an underpainting. An underpainting is like the beginning of a painting, like the sketch stage of a painting, just making sure that's all dry. And then you would do layers of glazes. This is pretty dark for an underpainting, but what's nice about it being so dark is I'm gonna do a glaze. I'm gonna do like two stripes of a glaze, one with water and one with the glazing medium, so you can see what the glaze does over darker areas and lighter areas. So another reason these experiments and studies are so great to have, because then, you know, these are common colors that you'll probably always use when you're painting. So having these studies as reference is going to be something you can use for a long time. You could always make new ones because it's fun to make them. And like I said, it's a good thing to do like when you're feeling stuck or you feel like you just don't know what to paint. Just, you know, making a bunch of these studies, filling up a palette with paint is a great way to get your creative juices flowing. Okay, glazing is really just creating a transparent like color that's almost like tinting over an underpainting, over something that's dry. So it can be over a dry wash, or it can be over thicker paint. Obviously over a wash, it's gonna show up more. So that's why we do these kind of underpainting techniques where you're doing lighter tones and getting the values in. And then you could do layers and layers of glazes over it, like unlimited amount of glazes over it to get the tone you want. So I'm gonna do like red orange on here, just so it really picks up because it's different from what the background is. So I'm taking water and I am adding water to this color to make it thin and transparent, like a wash. And then I'm just gonna do a stripe of this glaze. And that was a little dark. I might do another one that's just the pure cadmium red, but I'm gonna smooth that out. So with glazes, sometimes you'll have like a dry brush, which I can show you right here, and kind of smooth some of the edges. Like I'm just kind of barely touching the canvas and get some of those, you know, you can really do a lot of detail in there. Okay, I'm gonna do a glaze still with water, but just with some of this pure red. So it's just a watery, watered down version of a color. And you can make it as thin and as transparent as you want. Glazes usually are pretty thin and pretty transparent. And then you could let this dry and do another set of glazes over it in any color, really. And what glazes are really good for getting, like for skin, you know, skin has some translucency in it, or there's like veins and stuff underneath skin. That's what this can do, like a lot of really subtle details and make a lot of really beautiful effects. I think here you could see if this was like clouds or water or something, it could start looking really cool, interesting, because it's picking up the lights and the darks in the underpainting and it's just like tinting them that color. Okay, now I'm gonna do glaze with the medium. This is actually glazing liquid. This is what this is meant for. And so you can do this with water if you don't have medium. I'm just gonna put a little bit here and here. But the glazing medium, the glazing liquid, is designed to create, I mean, they're emulating like oil painting techniques. So it's making the acrylic paint more fluid and more transparent. So mixing in this glazing medium is going to give the transparency of water while also keeping the saturation. So the saturation is like the vibrancy of the paint. So I'm mixing quite a bit of glaze into this cadmium red. So you can see, and you can see we have the same amount of transparency where we're seeing the darks and lights through, we're seeing the values of the underpainting through this glaze, but it has more saturated effect. Like the red is more red than, and it's not, you know, watered down by the water. And even if we do what I did with the water, you know, I'm blending it out, and I can take this dry brush and come in and blend in some of the edges in different places. So I think you can see the difference, especially right here between the water glaze and the glazing medium glaze. I'm gonna do a little more with this orange red here. It just gives you a little more control and more saturation, like I said, so you can see what the orange does. And that's compared to, that was similar to this. So we can again see the saturation levels are showing up here differently and more vibrantly. And then you can always come in with your paper towel and wipe off the areas you don't like, or smooth out some of the edges. So that is glazing. And I just want you to practice these techniques, practice different brush strokes, use a lot of paint, use the wet paint, see what everything does. Make sure to write down what everything is. So this is a water glaze. And I'll kind of like make a line between the two. And this is medium glaze. It's still wet, so it's hard to, and that's like where the medium glaze is. So I'll know, wait here, I'll know when I'm looking at it. And I'm gonna rip up this tape later when it dries, and I'll write it on the actual canvas itself. And this is cadmium red medium. And then we have, sometimes I just write cad yellow medium, and we have the ultramarine blue. So it's good to keep track of what you were doing because there's all kinds of glazing tests and swatches you can do, and you definitely want to keep track of it because you can create some amazing effects, but it'd be really hard to remember exactly what you did just from looking at this. And, you know, writing stuff down and making these studies really helps you learn about what the paint can do, and it really like deepens your knowledge of mixing paint, and you can get really into it. And so yeah, just take your time. You know, this was the first ones I did. Oh, I forgot to show you one thing that I wanted to show you that I said I was going to do. So if you do have a palette knife and you have a lot of paint left over, it can be kind of fun. You don't have to do this, but it can be kind of fun to paint with the palette knife. So I'm gonna get a lot of paint on here, and you can just kind of scrape it on. And if it's not totally blended, sometimes that makes nice effects. And then if you scrape it, you can almost do that like similar to the scumbling glaze. It's like a palette knife glaze where you can see the color underneath too. You can wipe it off. And you can keep scraping off if you want, or you can go down to the canvas if it's not totally dry. And then I'm just gonna take a little bit of the red and show you, see how vibrant that can get and how dark that can get compared to the red that I put on with the paintbrush. This is really a different kind of look, texture. We'll get more into texture, but sometimes if I have extra paint on my palette, I just like to mess around with this, see what things do. You know, compare between the brush strokes and the palette strokes. And then you have this reference canvas to look at while you're painting other paintings. And you can see all these different techniques you can add to your painting. And you can mix everything up and make a mess and have fun. I'm gonna use the rest of this and just see what it does. It's starting to dry a little bit, so I'm moving it over to where it is not dry. It's turning a little brown. If you mix all the primary colors together, you get like a brown black, which is also good to know how to make a nice dark black and brown without using black. There's always debate about whether it's okay to use black or not, but I say this is more coming out maroon. I say do whatever you want. It's up to you. If you like black, go use some black. If you want to try making your own black by mixing the complementary colors, that's awesome. Let's see what happens here. I'm not doing an exact mixing experiment here because I'm just using what I already have. And the paint's starting to dry a little bit, so it's getting that like tacky feeling. But we can see we got like a little bit of a lighter brown here. Just put it on top. Well, that's a nice like chocolate brown color that could be used for so many different things. Okay, there we go. See if I get a little darker, if we can get into an almost black. Kind of have to get the right proportions, which is, I'm not set up for that right now. I'm just kind of having fun and making a mess. Might need to see if I put more red into this. We can get closer. My point is I want you to have fun with it and not like feel like it's too serious or you can mess up. Ooh, that got dark. It's kind of that's like a really great shadow color, this purple. I'm gonna put some over here. I'm putting it on a darker color, but I'm gonna put some on the lighter color so you can see how dark that got, which is kind of fun. All right, keep going with this. Have fun with it, experiment. Try mixing all the colors, the brush strokes, doing glazes, washes, gradients, all the fun stuff, and just enjoy it.